When you talk about the best MCU villains ever, you'll usually find Eric Killmonger near the top of just about everyone's list. Played with the perfect amount of ferociousness, charisma, and tragedy, Killmonger cemented himself as one of the greats. But have you ever stopped to fully analyze Killmonger's plan to see what he actually wanted and how feasible it was? Well, that's why we're here today in another MCU Villain Spotlight. What was Killmonger's actual plan and how did it fall apart? Or would you say it succeeded? Let's get into it right now. So right away, we need to talk about what drove Killmonger. What exactly did he want and why did he want it? I think when you talk about Marvel villains, they mostly fall under three different camps. The first is your standard rule the world type of baddie. Your egos, your Hellas, your Dormammus, etc. They mostly want to just burn everything down and destroy everything to rebuild in their own image. They provide a great threat but don't usually have the most depth. The second MCU villain option is what I like to call a Tony Stark whoopsie, where basically Tony was the cause of a big bad. Ironmonger, Whiplash, Aldrich Killian, Ultron, Vulture, and Mysterio are all because of Tony or the Stark name. These guys create raised stakes but have definitely gotten repetitive over the years. But it's the third type of villain who is the most fascinating. It's the bad guy who you can understand where they're coming from, even if their methods are a bit extreme. Under this category, you have someone like Thanos, who in Infinity War was a nuanced character who wanted to save the universe by destroying half of it, and then you have Killmonger, who felt his people were being oppressed and it was time to step out of the shadows and use Wakanda's highly advanced technology to help start a revolution. We'll get into how exactly Killmonger set about his plan in a bit, but let's talk first about Killmonger's motivation. Like many individuals, Killmonger was inspired and molded by the role models in his life. In this case, it was his father, N'Jobu. N'Jobu was King T'Chaka's brother, and while out as a spy in the world, N'Jobu saw the plight of his people. As N'Jobu told T'Chaka, leaders have been assassinated, drugs have flooded their communities, and over-policing had led to mass incarcerations. This led N'Jobu to want to use Wakanda's resources and vibranium to help. But Wakanda at this stage was very adamant about staying hidden. In the very opening scene where N'Jobu recounts the history of Wakanda to a young Killmonger, N'Jobu paints the hidden country as one of the most powerful nations in the world, leading to young Killmonger to ask if they still stay hidden, to which N'Jobu says yes. You can tell the mindset of both of them here. If you have such great and awe-inspiring power that could truly help those in need, why would you hide? That's the crux of Killmonger's character and is what drives him to do everything he ends up doing. Of course, then N'Jobu is killed by T'Chaka in a move that you could call self-defense, but is a little questionable. And yes, we the audience saw what happened and know the true situation, but think of it from young Killmonger's point of view. He grows up with his father being a seemingly noble hero who wants to help people under immense oppression, and whose country has turned their backs on the two of them. Then Killmonger witnesses Wakanda show up, murder his father, and leave. This is a huge catalyst for Killmonger. Although in the later dream sequence when N'Jobu comments how Killmonger isn't shedding any tears for him, and Killmonger responds with a nonchalant, everybody dies, we know that through flashbacks Eric very much did cry over his father's body, and even cries in the dream. He loved his father and vowed to complete the mission, but now his hatred for everything Wakanda stood for and represented was even worse because of his father's death. So now it's time to talk about his plan. Well, first things first, Eric had to get good, as the kids say nowadays. He joined the Navy SEALs and became one of the top mercenaries in the world and would do anything to get what he wanted. As he tells T'Challa, he's trained, he's lied, he's killed in countries all over the world. He even killed his own brothers and sisters just so he could get a chance to kill T'Challa. This really does show the flawed mindset of Killmonger. Yes, he wants to save African life, but he isn't hesitant at all to take it if it moves him closer to his ultimate goal. The best example of this is his girlfriend Linda. She helps with the robbery, Killmonger and her seem like they have a truly loving and passionate relationship, and then Killmonger doesn't hesitate for a second to kill her in order to kill Claw. Brutal, but it's what he thinks needs to be done. Now, I know Killmonger may just come across as a really spiteful and revenge-focused individual, but his actual plan is nothing short of genius when you think about it. We first see a grown Killmonger helping Claw steal a valuable vibranium artifact. And while this might just come across as a simple money heist, it actually was the first step in a really complicated plan. Killmonger knew that helping Claw resurface would draw the attention of the Wakandans and renew their hatred of Claw. who had attacked them years before. Then, when T'Challa and his crew came to escort Klaue back to Wakanda after his capture, Killmonger helped break him out. Not because he wanted to rescue Klaue or anything, but because he knew it would make him look a lot better to the people of Wakanda if the Black Panther returned empty-handed, only for Killmonger to be the one to bring Klaue's body back to the country. To some Wakandans, including Wakabi, this is seen as ultimate justice. By bringing Klaue's body, he's able to get past the border tribe and have a meeting with the Wakanda leaders. This is where Killmonger and T'Challa had their first face-off, and we got to see the difference between the two characters. While T'Challa insisted that Wakanda's weapons would not be used to wage a war against the world, Killmonger spat back at him that the King of Wakanda should be responsible for oppressed black communities everywhere. He revealed his birthright and his true identity, and with an impressive knowledge of Wakandan culture, he challenged T'Challa for the throne. Of course, in their first fight, Killmonger won and chucked T'Challa off the waterfall, committing the cardinal sin in movies by believing waterfalls were deadly. Has he ever seen a movie before? No one ever dies after going over a waterfall. That was really Killmonger's only big blunder, I think, in the entire movie. Then Killmonger went through the ritual to become the new Black Panther, much to everyone's chagrin. As an added twist of the knife, Killmonger made sure to burn all the remaining heart-shaped herbs so that no one could come and challenge him. Once granted with power, Killmonger set the next phase of his plan in motion, with the goal to basically restart the entire world through revolution, but this time with Wakanda on top of it all. He planned to send advanced weapons to all the war dogs Wakanda had throughout the world, with the message of supplying them to black communities so that they could kill everyone who got in their way. And it would have worked if it wasn't for T'Challa, who had survived thanks to M'Baku and his friends and family. Coming back to challenge Killmonger, he was able to stop the weapons from leaving the country and ended up mortally wounding Eric. In a total boss move, T'Challa offered to try to save Killmonger's life, but Killmonger didn't want to live in bondage like his ancestors and refused. Hey, at least you got to see Wakanda, right? Now, although it's technically correct in saying that Killmonger failed in his ultimate plan, because of course he did, he wanted to start a revolution and kill a lot of people in the process, but T'Challa ended up stopping him. But it's still hard to say that Killmonger totally lost, right? Because in a way, he ended up accomplishing what he wanted, which was for Wakanda to stop being so dang secretive and use its resources to help struggling black communities. This is why Black Panther is one of the best MCU movies, and also why Killmonger is one of the best villains. Because Killmonger ended up changing T'Challa's perspective on the world. Although Killmonger's methods were extreme and out of control, his mindset was right enough to convince T'Challa that his country's way of doing things, although traditional, needed to change. T'Challa obviously didn't agree with Killmonger's big plan, but he saw the value and importance of helping those in need and completely reshaped Wakanda's foreign policy. So in that way, Killmonger won. Overall, Killmonger will now always be one of the top villains the MCU has ever given us. He is so popular that although his death seems pretty permanent, there are still a ton of people who want to see him return. Those clamors have only gotten louder ever since the tragic death of Chadwick Boseman. With the decision to not recast T'Challa, all eyes have been on Black Panther 2 and who's going to step up and take over. Although Shuri is the most likely option, you'll find a lot of people saying that Killmonger should be revived and take over, giving him a redemption arc. And although that isn't likely to happen, it would be interesting to think about if Killmonger could ever become a true hero after his brutal past. Do you think it's possible for him to be redeemed? We may not see Killmonger back in the traditional sense, but Marvel's What If does allow fans to see Killmonger in a way I'm sure a lot of us want, as King of Wakanda. It isn't the grand return to the MCU that I'm sure a lot of us expected, but hey, it still gives us our sweet, sweet Killmonger fix.